I've transmigrated into a book. Others are either the female lead holding the script or the arrogant, bouncing villainess. But me, the book only gave me 2 words for my identity: crowd's mockery, commonly known as extra. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now, the story begins. My task is to use the most vicious words to mock and ridicule the villain when he's down and out. It's just being a mouthpiece. Finish the scene after cursing. Simple as that. 3 days later, I found the half-dead villain in the mass grave and fell into deep thought. Can someone tell me why a mere extra like me has a side quest? I transmigrated into a historical romance novel. The system only appeared in my mind for a moment, leaving behind a single sentence. After your role is finished, you're free to live as you wish. As long as the plot doesn't collapse, you can leave this place once the story concludes. Before I could even ask any questions, it vanished without a trace. A month later, I finally got the only chance in the entire book to make an appearance. The force of the plot pushed me onto the bustling streets of the capital. A prison cart slowly passed by, escorted by government soldiers, shackled in chains, imprisoned inside. Was none other than Zhu Xingjian, the powerful villain who once dominated the court but had now fallen from grace. He assisted the 5th prince in his failed bid for the throne, and as a result, his family was executed and his clan exterminated by the new emperor, the male lead. He was paraded through the streets and scheduled for execution. His prisoner's uniform was stained with blood, his disheveled hair covering his face, and his broken leg knelt in a twisted posture. Once a powerful figure who could overturn clouds and rain, he was now a prisoner despised by everyone. A few passers-by beside me were spitting with fury. Bah, treacherous villain, bringing chaos to the court. You deserve to die 1,000 deaths. The crowd was instantly ignited, with jeers and curses rising like roaring waves. An invisible force pushed me forward, and my mouth opened uncontrollably. A sharp, biting voice burst from my throat, louder than anyone else's. Oh Tilda, isn't this the most loyal dog by the 5th prince's side? Didn't get a high position, so you've settled for a prisoner's cart instead? TSK, our emperor is truly merciful, not having you executed outright. The more I spoke, the more worked up I became, each line more venomous than the last. Why aren't you saying anything? Cat got your tongue. If I were you, I would have bashed my head against the prison wall long ago, rather than come out and disgrace myself. The crowd jostled along the direction the prison cart was moving. Someone shoved a rotten egg into my hand. Throw it at him. I was desperately resisting touching that egg inside, yet like a puppet on strings. I took it and accurately smashed it against Zhu Xingjian's brow bone. The sticky, foul-smelling egg liquid trickled into his jet-black eyes. Half hidden by his disheveled hair, Zhu Xingjian, who had been silent all along, suddenly shuddered violently. Then, he slowly turned his gaze sideways. His cold, lifeless gaze pierced through the laughing crowd and landed precisely on me. In the scorching heat of summer, I felt as if I had fallen into an icy abyss, shuddering uncontrollably. Truly worthy of being the biggest villain in the book, a single glance from him nearly scared me to death. The prison cart faded into the distance, and I pressed a hand to my wildly beating heart. Thankfully, I had only crossed paths with this great villain once. 3 days later, at the mass burial ground 100 miles from the capital, standing on the hilltop, I gazed down at Zhu Xingjian lying on the ground and fell into deep thought. Matted black hair, mixed with blood and grime, was plastered across his face, obscuring his features. His twisted limbs were covered in blood, the wounds so deep the bones were visible. There was hardly a patch of unbroken skin left on his body, a truly gruesome sight. The hired corpse collector fished him out from the pile of bodies, accepted a few copper coins, and left without a word. The rule of this trade was simple: take the money, do the job, and never ask questions. I crouched down and felt Zhu Xingjian's neck. There was still a faint pulse. You can't die now, I'm counting on you for my ancestral home. But running into me, you're actually quite lucky. Who would have thought that after my one appearance, I'd be done with this book? But why does a mere background character like me have a side quest to protect the ancestral home? In Apricot Blossom Village, there was an unwritten rule: if a family had no male heir, the ancestral home would be reclaimed by the village chief. If one insisted on living there, they had to pay rent, 5 taels of silver each year. Reporting such bully behavior to the authorities was useless, since the county registrar was the village chief's son-in-law, and the registrar was also a cousin of the county magistrate. With such backing, the village chief felt emboldened to do anything without fear. I had planned to spend money to find someone to pretend to be my husband, just to get through this for now, and then slowly figure out a long-term plan. But then the village chief added, the man must not be of a different surname, he must be a blood relative or from the same clan. Same clan. When you're poor, no one in the bustling city cares about you. When I crossed over, all I had by my side was an elderly, blind grandmother. This is clearly bullying us. A widow and her orphaned daughter. If there are no male relatives, then there are no blood ties. They just want a male heir. Fine, I'll just make one myself. Making a baby requires a man. And if I'm going to have one, I need to find a high-quality man. The village's misfits and rejects can be completely ignored. Just as I was worrying about where to find a high-quality man, one day I went to the capital's market and overheard some passers-by chatting. Have you heard? That person wasn't executed, but was dealt with so harshly. Exactly. The emperor's methods are truly ruthless. After thoroughly humiliating them, he didn't even grant a quick death, just broke their limbs and threw them into the mass grave to die. Once the wolves come out from the mountains at night, probably not even their bones will remain. Mass grave, fed to wolves. I recalled the plot from the original book. This segment marks the conclusion of the main story, where the male protagonist defeats the antagonist and rules the world alongside the female lead. The great villain Zhu Xingjian met a tragic end, with his entire family executed. However, because the original author portrayed Zhu Xingjian's character as so captivating and compelling, readers strongly demanded a side story to resurrect him. Thus, the author wrote a side story in which Zhu Xingjian miraculously survives. He is found by the fifth prince's trusted followers, makes a comeback, and assists the fifth prince in reclaiming the throne. He unexpectedly got injured and lost his memory during the palace coup, then met his destined one who healed him. They fell in love at first sight and spent their lives together. As for how he survived earlier, the author didn't explain. A bold plan flashed through my mind. Just when I was feeling sleepy, someone offered me a pillow. The book describes Zhu Xingjian as having top-tier looks and physique, and coming from a prestigious family. But he's the major villain I once publicly humiliated, not to mention the risk of being discovered by the emperor if I save him. What if the villain recognizes me, gets enraged, and kills me? However, the village chief is coming in a few days to take back the ancestral home. Am I supposed to let a 70-year-old grandmother wander the streets with me? After much deliberation, I gritted my teeth. At this point, we might as well take a gamble, after all. This part doesn't exist in the story at all. Even if I manage to snag the villain, it shouldn't affect the plot. Once I get what I want, I'll keep the child and ditch the father. He can go back and fight for his throne, and I'll raise my kid. Once the whole story plays out and the time is right, I can go back. Once the thought arose, it was hard to suppress. Seeing that it was getting late, I immediately hired people and a carriage and headed straight for the mass grave 100 miles away. Before nightfall, I managed to pull out Zhu Xingjian, who was on the verge of death. With great effort, I dragged him onto a straw mat, huffing and puffing as I pulled him down the mountain, and brought him back to my small wooden cabin, lighting a candle in the dark. I gulped down several large mouthfuls of water before finally catching my breath. I found a towel, soaked it, and crouched beside the straw mat to untie the ropes. As the straw mat unfurled, Zhu Xingjian's mangled body was revealed. Carefully using the towel, I brushed aside the tangled hair from his face and wiped away the bloodstains, revealing Zhu Xingjian's features. My eyes lit up, a flash of amazement crossing my face. With his sharp brows, high nose, and jade-like complexion, even in his state, he couldn't hide his noble aura. As if guided by some unseen force, I reached out, wanting to touch that jade-like skin. A scorching hand clamped around my wrist, its grip terrifyingly strong. I looked up in horror. Meeting a pair of pitch-black eyes, there was not a trace of humanity in them, only a bottomless gloom and murderous intent. You, Phut! Zhu Xingjian suddenly spat out a large mouthful of blood, glaring at me with a sinister expression, the veins on his neck bulging. Zhaohe, is that you back? From the inner room came the old woman's aged voice. I have no name in the book. The old woman called me Ajo, but I found it unpleasant, so I later changed it to my own name. It's me, Grandma. I replied nervously, struggling desperately to break free from Zhu Xingjian's grip, yet his strength remained unyielding. The old woman, leaning on her cane, groped her way out. What's that smell? It's so foul and fishy. I glanced at Zhu Xingjian and casually made up a story. It's a wounded wild boar. It got its leg caught in a trap, fell into a pit, and knocked itself out. I found it and brought it back since no one else noticed. The old woman crouched down. Feeling around to get a closer look, my heart skipped a beat, and I used all my strength to break free with a sudden jerk. Smack, a crisp sound rang out. The back of my hand slapped Zhu Xingjian hard across the face. His head snapped to the side from the impact, but his cold, piercing gaze remained fixed on me, his eyes swirling with an unbelievable, raging fury. "What was that sound?" Granny asked, puzzled. "Nothing. The pig is just too strong. I was patting it to see how thick the fat is." "Granny. Don't touch it, it's dirty." I hurriedly stopped Granny's hand and covered Zhu Xingjian's mouth with my other hand to keep him from making a sound. An unmarried woman bringing a man home, and a serious criminal at that, in a place where reputation was so highly valued in ancient times. "Don't make Grandma angry to death." Wrapped in a mat, how big must it be? It could last us for many days. A happy smile appeared on Grandma's face. "Exactly, you go rest first, I'll take care of this pig." I coaxed and persuaded Grandma to go back to the inner room. Turning back, I saw blood trickling from the corner of Xieheng's mouth again, his breathing weak and rapid, looking like he was about to die again. "Sorry about that, I was actually trying to save you." I quickly let go and explained. "You." He struggled to squeeze out the words. "Damn egg, her." I froze. "Out of all the people who hit you, how come you only remember me?" Zhu Xingjian's chest heaved violently, as if using all his strength to spit out one word. "Stinky." He spat out another mouthful of blood, his head lolled to the side, and he completely passed out. I scratched my head, only realizing it belatedly. It seemed to be written in the original book that he was an extreme neat freak. I carried the weak-breathing Zhu Xingjian to the home of veterinarian Liu in the east of the village. Dr. Liu recognized him but didn't make a fuss. He was one of the few people in the village who genuinely cared for me and Granny, so it didn't hurt to tell him about the plan. After all, I would need to seek his help many times to heal Zhu Xingjian's injuries. While muttering about how audacious I was, how I was damaging my reputation, and how bizarre my ideas were, he swiftly set the bones, bandaged the wounds, applied medicine, and wrapped Zhu Xingjian up like a mummy before handing him back to me, as dawn was about to break. I carried Zhu Xingjian back to the bed in my room. The small wooden cabin only had 2 rooms. Considering his severe injuries and for the sake of the plan, I gave him the bed while I slept on the floor. Several days passed, and Zhu Xingjian remained unconscious. To keep it from Granny, I specifically bought some black mountain pork. "Grandma, there's plenty of meat to eat, I'll cure the rest for winter." I piled a generous portion of meat into her bowl. Good, good." Grandma ate in small bites, her face full of contentment. Before we could finish our meal, the door suddenly rattled with urgent pounding. The village chief barged in with several strong men, his narrow eyes sweeping contemptuously over Grandma and me in the room. "Zhao He, your family has no male heirs, according to the rules. You can't live in this house anymore, either pay up or get out." The burly man grabbed the old woman and started pulling her outside. I rushed over to shield the old woman, my anger boiling over. "What's the hurry? Give me 1 more month. In a month, someone will naturally take over this house." Empty words. Rules are rules. Someone, the village chief cast a sidelong glance. "Let's see who dares to move." I grabbed the grass-cutting knife by the door and held it in front of me, my eyes fierce. "If pushed to the brink, either you die or I live. Taking a few down with me is worth it." The village chief only wanted to profit and didn't actually want to cause any deaths. Intimidated by my desperado-like demeanor, he waved his hand in frustration. "Fine, 1 month. Let's see who you can find to help you. Now get out." After he left, Granny wiped her tears with a worried expression. It took me a long time to comfort her and finally get her to sleep. That night, as I routinely wiped down the unconscious Zhu Xingjian and changed his dressings, my mind was troubled by the village chief's pressure to vacate the house. A moment of distraction, while turning Zhu Xingjian over, I didn't pay attention to the position and ended up flipping him right off the bed. Those deep, unfathomable black eyes slowly opened, with the confusion of someone just waking up. They turned cold and sharp the moment they saw my face. "Who are you?" The voice carried a chill. "Shh, keep your voice down." I lowered my voice and crouched down. "You don't want anyone to find out you're still alive, do you? Then do as I say." Zhu Xingjian suddenly raised his hand and grabbed my neck, his gaze cold and menacing. "What is your purpose? Where is this?" The hand on my neck was like an iron clamp, squeezing so tight I couldn't breathe, my face flushing with blood. Damn it. If only I hadn't helped him fix his hand first. I saved you. You can't. Ungrate, spit it out, you fool. Everyone in the Southern Kingdom wishes for my miserable death, and you're saving me. Ha! He sneered coldly, his grip tightened, his gaze sharp. "What exactly are you trying to do? Let go." On the verge of suffocating to death, I slapped him across the face. The familiar crisp sound rang out again. leaving Zhu Xingjian momentarily stunned, seizing the opportunity. I landed another punch on the unhealed sword wound on his chest. The intense pain caused Zhu Xingjian to loosen his grip slightly. Taking advantage of the moment, I pried his hand away and collapsed to the ground. Cough, cough, cough. He clutched his neck, kicking his legs and desperately scrambling backward. The room was narrow, and after just a few steps, his back hit the wall, leaving him with nowhere to retreat. Zhu Xingjian propped himself up with one hand and leaned over like a ghost. The humiliation of that slap ignited a murderous glint in his eyes. You're asking for death. A sharp gust of wind swept in, carrying a ruthless intent. Instinctively, I closed my eyes and ducked my head. Zhao He, is there someone in the house? I thought I heard someone speaking. The old woman appeared leaning on her cane, tilting her head slightly to listen for any movement, her eyes vacant as they gazed into the void. The old woman's arrival saved me. Zhu Xingjian noticed the newcomer at once and immediately recognized that the old woman was blind. He then turned to glance at me, timid and fearful of death, and withdrew his hand, which had been poised to strike with a sharp, forceful palm strike. Zhu Xingjian's thin lips moved slightly. I was startled and rushed over to cover his mouth with my hand. I blinked rapidly, making a pleading expression to signal him not to make a sound. The woman's fragrance wafted over, and her palm was soft. Zhu Xingjian looked at me coldly and remained silent. I panicked, leaned close to his ear, and whispered in an extremely low voice, "If you speak, I'll turn you over to the authorities. The emperor won't let you off." You. Before I could finish, Zhu Xingjian suddenly pushed me away with force, turning his head aside. His jaw tight, a faint blush seeming to appear on his pale profile. It seemed he was quite angered by my threatening words. I was talking in my sleep, Granny. And accidentally fell off the bed again. "I'm sorry to have disturbed you." I stood up and went over to help the old lady back to her room, explaining as I went. After chatting with the elderly woman for a few words and waiting until she fell asleep, I quietly tiptoed back to my room. Zhu Xingjian had already half reclined on my bed again. Though I had no idea how he managed to climb up there with his injured leg, I touched my stinging neck, even in the hazy bronze mirror. I could see a large bruise and clear finger marks on it. "You're really ruthless." I grabbed the wooden comb from the dressing table to throw at him, but when I met his icy gaze, I chickened out. "I'm your savior. You can't repay kindness with enmity," I said, pointing to the wound on my neck. Zhu Xingjian lifted his eyelids to look at me. "You haven't answered my previous question yet." I came to my senses, walked to a spot 3 steps away from him, and briefly explained this place. As well as my and Granny's identities, I was gathering firewood in the mountains and happened to pass by the mass burial ground. "I saw you were still breathing, so I brought you back." Zhu Xingjian stared at me intently, as if judging the truth in my words. He stared at me for as long as I stared back at him. Their eyes met. One as deep as the sea, the other as clear as water. After a long moment, he lowered his gaze. "You shouldn't have saved me. I have nothing to repay you with now. If misfortune strikes, I might even drag your entire family down with me." "Yes, you do," I said, staring at his picturesque features. "Have you ever heard the saying, when a life-saving grace is too great to repay, the only way is to offer oneself in return?" "What do you mean?" Zhu Xingjian narrowed his eyes slightly. I don't know where I found the courage, but I stepped forward, hooked my finger under his chin, and smiled like a rogue. "What I mean is, I've taken a fancy to your body. You can repay me with it." Zhu Xingjian's jet-black eyes gazed at me, deep and cold like a frigid pool. "Which of the 4 virtues, propriety, righteousness, integrity, and honor, do you even know?" He slapped my hand away. "I only know how to eat and take things for free." I pinched the corner of my clothes, smiling as I secretly cast flirtatious glances. "Very well, stay with me for a month. During this time, I will find you a skilled physician to heal your injuries and restore your health. When the time comes, if you still wish to leave, I will not force you to stay. How does that sound?" I coaxed him gently. "You're severely injured and all alone. If you venture out recklessly, you'll be captured and brought before the emperor in less time than it takes for an incense stick to burn. Do you really want to endure that inhuman torture again?" Zhu Xingjian remained unmoved, his expression stern and cold. "Even if it means certain death here, I will never use my looks to serve others." "Oh, then leave right now," I said, stepping back 2 paces to clear the way. Zhu Xingjian seemed taken aback by my decisiveness. He glanced at me, then threw off the covers and got out of bed. With a thud, he fell awkwardly onto the floor beside the bed, the knife wound on his chest and stomach tearing open, blood seeping through his pristine white undergarments. He tensed his body, using his arms to drag himself forward. slowly crawling. I stood before him, and for every step he took forward, I took one back, as if walking a little dog. He crawled for a long time, drenched in sweat and utterly exhausted, yet he still couldn't make it out of my small boudoir, which was less than 2 square zhong in size. Go on. I stood with my hands behind my back, looking down at him from above. Zhu Xingjian pressed his lips tightly together, trying to push himself up, but his broken bones and severe injuries sent him tumbling back down heavily. He fell awkwardly at my feet. Instantly deflated, breathing rapidly with a face as pale as paper, I lifted my foot and lightly tapped his handsome face with the embroidered shoe, feigning a mocking tone, "TSK, TSK. At this speed, you won't be able to escape with your life." The slender ankle was seized by a scorching, large hand. Zhu Xingjian raised his head, his pale face flushed with an unnatural redness from anger. "Get away from me." With a slight exertion of force, I shook off his hand and crouched down to meet his gaze directly. "What's the matter? Can't handle this level of humiliation? If you ever fall into the hands of those who despise you, their methods and tricks will surely be far more numerous than mine." Zhu Xingjian thought of the humiliation he had suffered earlier, his face growing increasingly pale and his body trembling slightly. After a moment of stalemate, he slowly closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his eyes were red-rimmed, and his voice was strained as he said, "Fine, I agree, 1 month is the limit." The progress was unexpectedly smooth. I raised a smile and said, "It's a deal." I scooped him up in my arms and walked briskly toward the bed. He grabbed my collar, a look of shock flashing in his eyes. "Right now, what do you mean?" I gently laid him on the bed and reached to undo his clothes, blinking innocently as I asked, "You scoundrel." Zhu Xingjian turned his head away, his body stiff, his face alternating between red and white. A few traces of flustered and helpless shame flickered in his deep, unfathomable black eyes. I instantly understood. I quickly let go and waved my hand, glancing at his split and bleeding wound. "No, no, no, I'm not interested in fighting while covered in blood. I just want to help you apply medicine and bandage it." I didn't know which word I said had provoked him, but I saw his jade-like skin gradually turn red. It looked rather appetizing. Zhu Xingjian's injuries were too severe, requiring expensive and delicate medicine for treatment and recovery. Even though Dr. Liu prescribed the medicine to me at the lowest price, it still cost me a considerable amount of silver. We were almost unable to put food on the table, so I had to go help Aunt Zhong at the village head's house with some farm work in exchange for meals. Zhu Xingjian, accustomed to a life of luxury, could barely manage a few mouthfuls of coarse noodles and cold tea. Today, when he saw the food I brought from another family, he turned his head and said coldly, "I'd rather starve to death than accept food given out of pity." "Hey, look at this temper of mine." I pinched his face and turned it toward me. "If you don't eat, then we'll consummate the marriage. Choose one." These past few days, I've been teasing him with words from time to time, and I've discovered that every time I tease him, he secretly blushes, a big villain, yet so innocent and adorable. Zhu Xingjian fell silent for a moment, then said in a cold, stiff tone, "My legs still can't move." "It's fine, just lie still. You have no shame. I'm taking care of you. You know, does it really matter who's on top? The result is what counts anyway." I don't know what Zhu Xingjian was thinking of, but the tips of his ears were bright red. "Want some?" I asked. Zhu Xingjian seemed to have made some kind of decision. He gave me a strange look, closed his eyes, and said, I held the rice bowl and looked at him. "Wait. You're not expecting me to feed you just because you closed your eyes, are you?" I thought about how I had been busy working in the fields all day and hadn't had time to go home to bring him food. He must have been starving, considering his hand injury hasn't fully healed yet. Feeding him is the least I can do. Zhu Xingjian waited for a moment, feeling something soft touch his lips, warm, exuding the aroma of wheat. He opened his eyes to find a palm-sized white steamed bun right in front of his face. "Try it, the white flour is very fragrant." I pushed the steamed bun further into his mouth. Zhu Xingjian, he reached out and took the bun, lowering his gaze as he silently began to nibble on it. I think I caught a flicker of disappointment in his eyes. He must be feeling down because he's lost the lavish feasts of the past and now has to make do with this poor food. Poor little thing, the big villain. I patted his shoulder and painted a rosy picture. "Once I find work in town these next couple of days and earn some money, I'll buy you meat to eat." Zhu Xingjian avoided my hand, his voice cold. "No need, sigh." He's angry just because he didn't get to eat meat. When Zhu Xingjian took the first bite of the steamed bun, he paused slightly, then proceeded to finish 3 large buns all by himself. "You ate so well. Do you want a reward?" I asked. What is it? Close your eyes, I said with a mysterious smile. Zhu Xingjian glanced at me with a mix of doubt and curiosity, then slowly closed his eyes once more. I went outside to fetch something, then came back in and closed the door. Zhu Xingjian heard the sound of fabric rustling and raised an eyebrow slightly. This outfit is a bit difficult to take off. Please wait a moment. My fingers were struggling with the clothing ties. Ancient people's garments were truly troublesome, after working at it for a long time. I finally managed to undo it. All right, you might feel a bit tired tonight. I walked over to him, giving a heads up as I went. Zhu Xingjian's Adam's apple bobbed as he responded. Let's get started then. I handed the items over to him. They were heavy. Zhu Xingjian frowned, opened his eyes, and saw that he was now holding a basket filled with an assortment of clothes, mostly men's attire. Are you toying with me? And not just once, but twice. The dissatisfaction and icy resentment in his eyes were on the verge of overflowing. I'm innocent. What do you mean? He looked at the object in his hand. What is this for? Oh, this is a collection of clothes from unmarried men in the surrounding villages that I had someone gather. They all have tears. So you can mend them with needle and thread. When you get paid, keep it for yourself. In the future, if you want to leave, you'll have some travel expenses. Won't you? I explained with great consideration. You want me to do needlework? The furrow between his brows deepened. I'm also worried you might get bored staying alone in the room all day. This will give you something to do to pass the time. By the way, once the door is closed, Grandma will think I've gone out to work and won't come into this room randomly. Just move quietly and don't let her discover you. I won't do these things. Get me some ink and brushes instead. I want to practice calligraphy. Zhu Xingjian tossed the basket aside. I understood clearly that his calligraphy practice was merely an excuse. What he truly wanted was to contact the fifth prince's trusted former subordinates. All our silver was spent on your medicine. Look, since you've taken care of those clothes, you can use that money to buy them yourself. This was Zhu Xingjian's first time following someone. Yet he ended up with the most destitute. During the day, I went out to work for others, earning money to buy medicine for him. Before I came here, I had never done any heavy or dirty work. Muscle soreness was one thing, but my hands were calloused and covered in wounds, making it so uncomfortable that I couldn't sleep well at night. But on several nights, in my drowsy state, I seemed to see Zhu Xingjian take the ointment he used for his own injuries and quietly apply it to my hands. After that, he quietly restrained his temper and clumsily picked up a needle and thread to learn how to mend clothes. Although he was a villain, he surprisingly had a bit of conscience. Fortunately, Zhu Xingjian had a strong constitution, and with the help of precious medicinal herbs, his injuries improved significantly. After nearly 10 days of recuperation, only his legs remained immobile. On payday, I bought a large piece of meat and then went to Dr. Liu's place to get some highly nourishing medicine. After having dinner with Granny and waiting for her to fall asleep, I mixed the leftover meat with the tonic herbs and stewed a pot of highly nourishing soup. Tonight, I planned to bring Zhu Xingjian along and get down to business as soon as possible. Zhu Xingjian held the bowl and drank the medicinal soup, then tasted the meat. Didn't you say all the money was spent? You've earned some wages, and since you're willing to follow me, how could I treat you poorly? Besides, it's about time your body gets properly nourished. I smiled, my eyes curving like crescent moons, then took the bowl and left. A quarter of an hour later, I returned after taking a fragrant, refreshing bath. Zhu Xingjian was half lying on the bed, having undone his upper garment because he found it too hot, revealing his firm and well-defined chest and abdomen, his skin tinged with a faint blush. A small bandage was wrapped around his left chest, his lips still pale, giving him a somewhat sickly and ascetic aura. The sight of this sickly, handsome man lying half-naked in bed made my young face flush, and I unconsciously quickened my pace. Hearing the footsteps, he lifted his gaze and looked toward me. The corners of his eyes were tinged with red, and a misty haze shimmered in his gaze. What did you put in the food you gave me? Just some tonic. I stood by the bed admiring his good looks for a while, then couldn't resist reaching out to touch his abs. TSK. These lines, this texture. Zhu Xingjian's body suddenly tensed up. He grabbed my mischievous hand and asked through gritted teeth, "Do you not know the difference between men and women?" "What difference?" "You're mine now." I pushed against his shoulder, using the momentum to press him down onto the bed. Straddling his waist, I let my fingertips wander across his heated body. Yet I couldn't help but wonder with confusion. I was sure I'd bought medicine to strengthen the body and enrich the blood, so why did his feverish state seem so unusual? Zhu Xingjian's expression was complicated, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "You gave me this, because you think I'm not good enough. I was afraid you'd get tired, so I wanted you to build up your energy in advance. I was completely acting out of good intentions, so why does he seem angry? I was just about to say something to coax him when suddenly, the world spun around me. Before I could even see how Zhu Xingjian managed it, our positions had already been reversed. His jet-black eyes stared fixedly at me, their gaze intimidating, with undisguised desire burning deep within. Since you've gone to such lengths, I'll make sure to serve you well, Zhao He. Zhu Xingjian's voice was hoarse and low, his large hand gripped my waist and lifted me up. The corners of his eyes shimmering with a faint crimson hue, I noticed the change in him, my eyes slowly widening. Oh no, I suspect Dr. Liu gave me the wrong medicine. Zhu Xingjian, this is a misunder. The rest of my words were completely muffled. The night is deep and long, with her by my side. Intermittent sobs were muffled against Zhu Xingjian's palm, his husky voice whispering in my ear. Quiet, don't let Grandma hear. Instead of easing, he pressed closer, step by step. Tears welled in the corners of my eyes, and I bit down hard on his palm. You did it on purpose, she accused. Zhu Xingjian curled his lips into a smile, like a bewitching enchantress. The consequence of a night of indulgence was that I had to stay home for 2 days before I had the energy to go see Dr. Liu. When I brought up the tonic, he pulled out the prescription to take a look. Oh no, I took the wrong one. That's the aphrodisiac meant for Aunt Zhong's bull. My vision went dark. No wonder Zhu Xingjian was like a bull, plowing vigorously all night long, holding my sore back. I returned to the wooden cabin. Outside stood a man in coarse cloth clothes, clinging to the outer door and tiptoeing to peer inside. Where did this little thief come from, daring to eye your grandmother's house? I casually picked up a small stone and threw it at the back of the man's head. The man let out an ouch, and turned around, clutching his head. It was Li Ergu from the village. When he saw me, his pockmarked face wrinkled into a grin as he leaned in mysteriously. Zhao He, is your family hiding a man? My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my expression neutral. Where did that rumor come from? I saw it with my own eyes, just now. A man's figure flashed past the window of your room. You must have seen wrong. No way, I saw it clearly and unmistakably. Li Ergu moved a bit closer to me, the sour smell on his body wafting over. Is he a relative of yours, or a lover? It's your father. If you're blind, go get it treated. Don't bark like a dog here and ruin my reputation. I didn't want to waste words on him and tried to walk past him. Li Ergu grabbed my hand, smiling ambiguously. There are no men in your family, and the village chief is going to take your house. But I have a way to help you. Do you want to hear it? Not interested. I shook my hand, but he held on tightly and wouldn't let go. Zhao He, you know I've liked you for a long time. Why don't we get married and have a son? If we register the house under the child's name, it can be saved. He spoke, his rough fingers rubbing against the back of my hand with a certain suggestive urgency. What a clever scheme. He's the brother of the village chief's daughter-in-law, all cut from the same rotten cloth. If I agree to this, in the end, won't my son and my house all end up being his? Does he really think I'm some naive village girl who's easy to fool? You want to marry me? I curled my lips into a faint smile. Yes. Li Ergu stared at my face, his heart fluttering. Then first show your sincerity with 100 taels of silver as betrothal gift. You crazy woman, are you daydreaming? Even the village squire next door only gave a few 100 taels for his daughter's dowry. You're just a poor village girl. And you're dragging along a blind old granny as dead weight. At most, 10 taels of silver is more than enough. For me, I wouldn't want to marry a penniless little brat like you anyway. If you can't pay up, then get lost. A good dog doesn't block the path. I lifted my foot, aiming to kick him right between the legs. Li Ergu quickly withdrew his hand to cover his crotch, his face flushing red with shame and anger. In half a month, just wait for your house to be repossessed. Even if you come begging on your knees, I might not help you then. Zhao He, is there some scoundrel bothering you? Granny will give you a stick to chase him away. Hearing the commotion, Granny grabbed the iron rod by the door and groped her way over. Seeing that I had taken the iron rod, Li Ergu turned around and scurried away in disgrace. After driving him off, I helped Granny back into the house. The old woman suddenly asked, Zhao He, lately I've been feeling strange noises in the house. Be honest with me, is there really a man hidden here? I was just about to speak when I looked up and saw Zhu Xingjian appear at the doorway. He was leaning against the doorframe with a cane in one hand, looking at me with a faint, ambiguous smile. The wooden splint on one of his feet had been removed. He was healing faster than expected. Is this the protagonist's magical halo? I made a shushing gesture at him. No, Granny, it's been hot lately, and there are lots of rodents and insects. Maybe a mouse or a cat got into the house and disturbed you. Really? Granny didn't seem convinced. Oh, listen, there's a cat that just ran into my room. I winked at Zhu Xingjian, signaling him to meow a couple of times. Zhu Xingjian froze for a moment, as if he had received some absurd command, silently curled his lips, and let out a breathy laugh. Leaning against the door, he lazily parted his lips and let out, meow tilde meow tilde. It really is a stray cat, the old woman said. After brushing it off, the old woman went back to her room. I pulled Zhu Xingjian into the room and closed the door, locking it. I was tugging at the sash around his waist as he followed me with lazy steps. Where did you get this stick? I found it under the window. You went out. No wonder someone saw you. Next time, you should only go out at night. Am I so unsightly that I have to hide myself away? Aren't you leaving soon? If someone sees you, I'll have to explain for a long time again. Although I won't marry again in the future, I don't want anyone to discover Zhu Xingjian's presence, lest it cause trouble later on. Who are you afraid of explaining to? That man from earlier. Do you really want to marry him? Somehow, I feel like Zhu Xingjian seems really displeased, but I'm more concerned about something else. Did you hear everything he said? Zhu Xingjian let out a light laugh, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Zhao He, you have quite the nerve. Actually scheming against me. You went to great lengths to keep me here, doing that kind of thing with me, just to have a child of your own, to help you hold on to this shabby house. What shabby house? This house is perfectly fine. Without this house and me, you would have been torn apart by wolves in the mass graves long ago. I glared at him and retorted, not realizing I had missed the point. Zhu Xingjian's face darkened as he backed me onto the bed, his tall frame leaning down over me. That's right, come to think of it, I should properly repay you. He suddenly smiled, his fingers pressing and rubbing my lips until they ached, then sliding down to my chin and abruptly tightening. Zhu Xingjian, I was forced to lift my head, my breathing growing rapid. I would never share a woman with another man. Don't even think about getting involved with other men again. What do you mean? We agreed on 1 month, don't you want to leave anymore? Then isn't this plot about to collapse? No, I just want a child. I don't want to change the direction of the side story. Zhu Xingjian heard the obvious disappointment in her voice, and inexplicably felt a fire ignite in his heart. Although this village girl is domineering, lustful, and impoverished, after spending a few days with her, Zhu Xingjian discovered that she wasn't entirely without redeeming qualities. Filial piety and kindness are her true nature. Not to mention she is indeed quite beautiful. That Li something dog is simply unworthy of her. Zhu Xing gradually moved closer to her. Don't worry, I will stay here as you wish. Wait, Zhu Xingjian gave me no chance to speak at all. The clashing, vibrant colors filled the entire room. Zhu Xingjian recovered from his injuries with astonishing speed. After just over half a month, he was already able to walk slowly without any assistance. Once again, I was amazed by the miraculous abilities of the protagonist in this fictional world. It's a pity my stomach still hasn't shown any signs of movement. Ever since he discovered my plan, it seems he's truly made up his mind to stick around here. After living a peaceful life with the man taking care of the household and the woman handling the outside world for so long, one day, as I watched Zhu Xingjian quietly mending clothes while basking in the sunlight in the room, I actually felt that living like this might not be so bad. I was startled by this thought, convinced that I must have been bewitched by his good looks and lost my senses, but soon, I realized the force of the plot was beginning to move again. Late one night, I was startled awake by the sound of Zhu Xingjian going out. Faintly, I could hear the sound of a conversation coming from the courtyard, unfamiliar male voice. Sir, conserve your strength, the fifth prince, the capital, Zhu Xingjian. The time is already known. The words were barely audible, so I quietly got up, hid beneath the window, held my breath, and strained to listen. Sir, what should we do with the woman in the house when the time comes? Should we take her back to the capital as well? She's just a village girl, thinking she can keep my child by virtue of having saved my life. Kill her. His cold and resolute words made me gasp in shock. Who's there? The man drew his sword, his sharp gaze sweeping toward the window. Don't make a commotion, I'll go check. Zhu Xingjian pressed his sword back into its sheath. I tightly covered my mouth and nose, not daring to make a sound, listening as the footsteps slowly drew closer. Meow, a black cat suddenly darted out from the window, brushing past Zhu Xingjian's face before leaping into the vegetable patch beside them. Disappearing in a flash, just a stray cat, the man visibly relaxed with relief. Zhu Xingjian remained silent, pensively staring at the window. Before long, the sound of footsteps faded away. I crouched down and quietly moved back to my makeshift bed on the floor to lie down. Just as I closed my eyes, the door creaked softly, and Zhu Xingjian walked over, silently bending down. I tried my best to pretend to be sound asleep, not daring to let him notice anything unusual. A cold hand rested on my neck, slowly tightening. My heart was in chaos, but I tried my best to steady my mind, pretending to wake up from suffocation. I blinked sleepily, reached for his sash, and with a forceful tug, pulled him over. I wrapped my arms around his waist, buried my head in his chest, adopting a posture of complete trust. Zhu Xingjian, I think I'm having sleep paralysis and can't breathe. I'm scared. Will you stay with me, please? Deliberately adopting a soft, delicate voice. I let out a couple of light whimpers. Zhu Xingjian released his grip from my neck, then lifted my head and gently brushed aside the sweat-dampened strands of hair from my forehead. I secretly bit the tip of my tongue. The sharp pain instantly filled my eyes with tears as I gazed at him, looking innocent and pitiful. Zhu Xingjian's gaze was deep and somber, his thin lips parting slightly. Silly, there are no ghosts in this world. I'm here with you, so rest easy. You're scarier than any ghost. So I can't rest easy at all. Thank you very much. I nodded, then buried my head in his chest again, forcing myself to ignore his scrutinizing gaze as I tried to fall asleep. After all, a villain is still a villain. I had been too careless, bringing home a vicious wolf. I need to change my plan. Before he follows the trusted aid of the fifth prince back to the capital, I must get pregnant as soon as possible, and then run away, as long as the Green Hills remain. There will be no shortage of firewood. When the plot reaches the part where he loses his memory, I'll return with our child and grandma to reclaim the ancestral home. During these days of playing dumb, I'll carry out the original plan while preparing an escape route. Zhu Xingjian gradually let down his guard and began acting alongside me. As the end of the month approached, I took a sip of freshly stewed lamb soup, and a wave of nausea rushed over me. At first, I thought it was because the lamb hadn't been properly cleaned of its gamey flavor, so I didn't pay it much mind. It wasn't until I realized my menstrual cycle was off that I belatedly understood what was happening. I found an excuse to go out and sort out Dr. Liu for a pulse diagnosis. My plan has succeeded. That night, the same unfamiliar man came to find Zhu Xingjian again. The original text stated that Zhu Xingjian led the remnants of the Fifth Prince's faction to lie low at a post station outside the capital for over half a month, then launched a palace coup on the day of the autumn harvest. Autumn harvest symbolizes the continuation of abundance and hope. I calculated the time, and the day after tomorrow would be the day he leaves. I did not tell Zhu Xingjian about the pregnancy for the past 2 days. I used my menstrual cycle as an excuse to refuse his advances. Perhaps he was too preoccupied with planning his return to the capital to seize the throne to notice anything unusual about me. The day after tomorrow arrived in the blink of an eye. The night before, Zhu Xingjian and I lay in the same bed. The 1-month deadline is almost here. Are you really not leaving? I asked drowsily, resting my head in the crook of his arm. Zhu Xingjian remained silent for a long while. Just as I was about to fall asleep, I heard him ask, "What do you think of the capital, Beijing?" "It's quite nice, bustling and lively," I replied with a yawn, answering casually. "Do you like it?" he asked again. My drowsy mind suddenly snapped awake. My first thought was, could it be that he plans to kill me, take my corpse to Beijing, and hang it up for public display to vent the humiliation he's endured all this time? "No, I don't like it," I answered quickly and firmly. Zhu Xingjian looked down at me for a long time before speaking. "All right, I understand." I was confused about what he understood, but didn't dare to ask, afraid that if I opened my mouth, he would detect my plan to escape and finish me off on the spot. I forced myself to stay awake all night, afraid that if I fell asleep, I might never wake up again. As a result, I stayed up until the early hours and then slept like a log. When I woke up, the room was quiet, and there was no sign of Zhu Xingjian. I quickly touched my neck. My head was still intact. He left, without killing me. On the bedside table, a letter was left, with a few words written in a bold and flowing script. "Gone for a while due to some matters. Will return soon. Wait for me." Wait for what? For you to come back and kill me. I immediately got up, packed my bags, and went to Grandma's room. "Grandma, we need to leave Apricot Blossom Village for a while." I told her that the end of the month had arrived, and we still hadn't found a way to keep the ancestral home. With little money left, we could no longer afford to live in this house. Grandma was very sad. "Then, will we ever be able to come back?" "I can." I held her thin, withered hand. "I will definitely find a way to get our home back as soon as possible. It's just that I'll have to trouble you to come with me and stay somewhere else for a while. I planned to take Grandma north, using the wages I had saved to find a temporary place to stay. Once the autumn harvest was over, we could return. As we were leaving, I happened to run into several strong men who had previously been with the village chief. They had received orders from the chief to drive Grandma and me away and seize the house. In the past, the village chief would have handled this matter personally, but this time, he didn't show up. When we reached the village entrance, Aunt Zhong caught up and wanted to take us back to stay at her place. With the village chief ahead and Zhu Xingjian behind, I didn't want to bring trouble upon her family, so I politely declined. Afraid of what? You probably haven't heard yet that bully of a village chief's family has gotten their comeuppance, Aunt Zhong said. What happened? What kind of comeuppance? Granny asked. Full of curiosity, Li Ergu went hunting in the mountains yesterday and accidentally fell off a cliff to his death. The village chief went up the mountain to search for him, got his foot caught in an animal trap, fell into a hunting pit, and had both legs severed by sharp tools. He was rushed to the town clinic overnight, and his condition remains uncertain. Everyone is saying that retribution has finally come to their family. Hearing about these consecutive accidents left me utterly stunned. How could they have met with such misfortune just one day before Zhu Xingjian left? Even so, the bully's dog remained loyal, guarding the ancestral home and refusing to let us live there again. Thinking of her own situation, Grandma was unwilling to trouble or burden Aunt Zhong. After several refusals, Aunt Zhong had no choice but to give us an address. My family has an old house that's been vacant for a long time, though it's quite a distance away. If you don't mind, you can stay there and settle down while figuring out how to reclaim this house, if you truly see me as a good person. You mustn't refuse again. Grandma could no longer decline and accepted her kindness. This old house is located in Daoyuan village to the north. I hired a carriage and it took about 10 days to reach the place. The house was dilapidated, but with some simple repairs and cleaning, it could be made livable. During this time, I kept an eye on the news from the capital while taking care of my pregnant body. However, my body grew increasingly delicate. I felt nauseous whenever I ate and spent my days drowsy, unwilling to wake up. No matter how carefully I tried to hide it, Grandma still noticed something was off. But when she discovered the truth, she didn't get angry as I had expected. Her aged hand rested on my still barely noticeable belly. That man, the one you brought back, that wild boar, is he the one? I was taken aback. You knew all along. Granny may be old and blind, but she's not foolish. She scolded with a mix of reproach and affection, lightly patting the palm of my hand twice. Granny said she had sensed there was a man in the house as early as the second day Zhu Xingjian arrived, but every time she asked me, I refused to tell her. It wasn't until she overheard Li Ergu saying he wanted to marry me and have children that she finally understood why I was hiding a man in the house. Grandma, aren't you angry that I messed up the plan? And you even had to travel such a long distance with me. Although I don't know who he is or why you had to leave the ancestral home in such a hurry, I'm old and not only can't help you at all, but I've become a burden to you. Since you don't blame me, how could I possibly blame you? I told Grandma everything, including Zhu Xingjian's identity. Grandma was shocked and nervously grabbed my hand. How did you get involved with such an important figure, if he finds out you deceived him? What are we going to do? I reassured her. Don't worry, Granny, I know what I'm doing. Once the right moment comes, the force of the plot will pull everything back on track. 5 more days passed, and news arrived from the capital. The 5th prince had successfully forced his way into the palace. Zhu Xingjian indeed never came looking for me again. I deliberately disguised myself and went to the capital, where I heard some news from street vendors. The plot, as I had guessed, was back on track. Zhu Xingjian had been struck on the head during the palace coup and lost his memory. The daughter of the former general who guards the nation, who is also Zhu Xingjian's destined one, learned medicine from a young age. Later, amid these changes, she followed in her father's footsteps and became the first female general of this dynasty. She fell in love with Zhu Xingjian at first sight and volunteered to treat and care for him, and Zhu Xingjian would also develop feelings for her. According to the development in the original story's extra chapters, the two eventually received the emperor's blessing for marriage and lived happily together. From this point on, Zhu Xingjian and I became strangers once again, with no further entanglements. For some reason, thinking of this made my heart feel heavy. Since the matter was already settled, I took a deep breath and turned to go to the medical clinic to get my miscarriage-preventing medicine. After picking up 2 packets of medicine, I saw that it was getting late and hurried to leave before the city gates closed. With my head down, I was walking quickly and accidentally bumped into someone coming from the side. I instinctively protected my stomach, staggering back 2 steps before being grabbed by the arm and pulled forward by the newcomer. Little liar, had enough hiding. The familiar cold voice, surrounded by a clear and chilly aura, made me look up abruptly. It was Zhu Xingjian. But how does he still remember me? You. What are you talking about? You've got the wrong person, right? I don't know you. My mind went blank with panic, and I tried to pull my hand back, but it wouldn't budge. Zhu Xingjian's large hand gripped my chin, forcing me to tilt my head up and look at him. Meeting his deep gaze, I guiltily averted my eyes. You don't recognize me. He let out a cold laugh. Zhu Xingjian released his grip, then moved his hand to rest on my slightly protruding belly. His icy fingers traced over it inch by inch. Like a venomous snake, every hair on my body stood on end as I tensed up. Suddenly, the world spun around me. He lifted me up and stepped into the carriage parked by the roadside. I panicked and struggled frantically. Where are you taking me? Let me go. How dare you kidnap a common woman in broad daylight? Ah. My body was lifted and pressed against the carriage wall. Unable to move, Zhu Xingjian's gaze swept over my entire body with intense aggression. His warm breath faintly brushing against my neck. Kidnap. He let out a light laugh, his breath sprayed by my ear, raising goosebumps all over my body as if an electric current had passed through me. Zhu Xingjian gently bit my earlobe, his tall frame pressing down on me with overwhelming intensity. His deep, magnetic voice whispered in my ear like that of an affectionate husband. It doesn't matter if you don't remember. I have my ways to make you slowly recall everything. I was so frightened that I fainted. When I woke up again, I found myself in a completely unfamiliar place. The room had an antique charm, and the decor and furnishings clearly indicated it belonged to a wealthy family. I got out of bed barefoot, but before I could take more than a few steps, the door opened. Zhu Xingjian walked in holding a bowl of medicine, and our eyes met. His gaze shifted downward, noticing my bare feet on the floor, and his brows furrowed. The 2 maids standing guard by the door, without waiting for his command, immediately fetched shoes and helped me put them on before silently withdrawing. Where do you think you're going? I need to go back. I'm worried about Grandma being alone in the house. Have you recovered from your amnesia? I pressed my lips together, silent. Anyway, since he caught me, it's just a matter of facing the consequences. Drink it. Zhu Xingjian handed the medicine in his hand to me. It's pitch black and smells awful. Before I die, can I say goodbye to Grandma? I looked at him pitifully. Zhu Xingjian was taken aback for a moment, then looked as if he was amused by my audacity. You just reminded me, I almost forgot you still have a relative. He coldly shoved the bowl into my hands. If you dare pour it out, I'll go capture and kill that person right now. With that, he turned and left without looking back. Not seeing my anxiety and tension, holding the bowl, I struggled for a long time. Since I couldn't go back either way, I might as well protect Granny, so I closed my eyes and gulped down the medicine. An hour later, I was still alive, feeling perfectly fine. Zhu Xingjian had indeed gone out to kill someone. But the ones he killed were the county magistrate and the registrar of Xinhua County. They were dismissed from their posts and beheaded on charges of extorting the people and oppressing and harming the common folk. The bully village chief of Apricot Blossom Village kept his life but lost both legs. Zhu Xingjian drove him to the streets to beg for a living and confiscated all his assets and land deeds for the state treasury. The villagers' houses he had seized through greed were also returned to everyone. Zhu Xingjian also brought the old woman to his residence. This is what the old woman personally told me. Then have we gotten our ancestral home back? I asked. Grandma nodded, then shook her head, hesitating as she said, we got it back, but it's in Zhu Xingjian's hands, he said. What did he say? This is the house he fought to get back. If you want it, you have to go ask him for it yourself. I went to find Zhu Xingjian for several days, but each time his guards stopped me with the excuse, the official is busy with official duties and cannot see the young lady. He asked me to come find him, yet he deliberately avoids seeing me. A man's heart is as deep as the ocean, hard to fathom. Both Grandma and I are being well taken care of with good food and drink, but it only makes me more uneasy. Every meal feels like a last meal before execution. 2 more days passed, and late at night, I was woken by someone kissing me. Zhu Xingjian, reeking of alcohol, was pressed tightly against me. My stomach was being crushed uncomfortably, so I struggled a little, but he held me even tighter. His voice choked with emotion as he spoke. Where are you trying to run off to again? Why do you always have to escape? Zhu Xingjian, let go of me first. I couldn't push him away. Eliminate the father, keep the child, the destined woman, Zhu Xingjian said slowly. his gaze locked on my face. Zhao He, if I hadn't awakened, would I have deserved to be toyed with by you for a lifetime, even dying without knowing I had a child? I was astonished. How could he? Suddenly, 2 lines of text appeared in my mind. Reminder: the original side story female lead disobeyed the system's commands, forcibly awakened Zhu Xingjian's consciousness in the book, and even caused the system to be sent back for repairs. This character has now been eliminated. To prevent the world in the book from collapsing, the vacant role will be filled by an extra, Zhao He. Who? Me? Is that even allowed? It turns out the plot's collapse wasn't my fault, but that of the destined heroine. So, Zhu Xingjian was also awakened by her. Wow, what an impressive woman. Wait. But I clearly heard people say you lost your memory. I voiced my confusion. Zhu Xingjian's dark eyes swept over my face, carrying a hint of a knowing smile. Disappointed. That was a rumor I had spread to lure you out. Why, if you clearly want to kill me, just do it directly. Why go through all this trouble? So, you heard everything that night. Zhu Xingjian's gaze was heavy. Since it was all out in the open, I decided to throw caution to the wind. So what if I did? I deceived you. All of it. Do whatever you want, kill me, cut me to pieces. The plot is ruined anyway, and I can't go back. I said it all in one breath and closed my eyes, waiting for death. After waiting for a long time, a lingering, gentle kiss landed on my brow. I won't kill you, since you can't return to your world. Stay here, imprisoned by my side for all eternity. How about that? Zhu Xingjian raised his hand to gently stroke my face, his eyes filled with an almost pathological obsession. I stared at him and asked uncertainly, Zhu Xingjian, you couldn't possibly have fallen for me, could you? Is it the power of the plot at work again? Because I took over the female lead's role, Zhu Xingjian seemed to see through my thoughts. I like it, but it has nothing to do with the plot. He leaned close to my ear and whispered something that made me blush. Over time, affection grows. Isn't that a form of liking too? You took my innocence, shouldn't you take responsibility for it? According to the laws of this dynasty, ruining someone's innocence is a crime punishable by imprisonment. Zhu Xingjian's tone turned cold and stern. I asked you, and you were willing too. You can't use your high official status to falsely accuse me. Well, precisely because I hold a high position, I can shield you. By rights, I saved you this time. You're being unreasonable. Zhu Xingjian curled his lips into a smile. Yes. A life-saving grace should be repaid with one's own body. That's what you taught me. That's not right. Wait, what are you doing? Zhu Xingjian untied his waistband and used it to bind my hands. Whether it's right or wrong shouldn't come from your mouth. Your body has always been more honest than you. That night, Zhu Xingjian was like a seductive enchantress, coaxing me to say countless times that I adored him. The next day, Zhu Xingjian summoned a royal physician from the palace to the residence. The long-bearded elder took my pulse and dared to advise, my lord, as the fetus grows older, it would be best to minimize intimate relations. I was so embarrassed I wanted to crawl into a hole. I silently pulled the blanket over myself and pretended to be dead. Zhu Xingjian, however, remained unruffled and said calmly, you may withdraw and write the prescription. After dismissing the old imperial physician, Zhu Xingjian sat by the bed and lifted my cover of shame. I went a bit too far last night. I should have sobered up and restrained myself as the wine wore off, yet I found myself sinking deeper into the warmth. Unable to extricate myself. Stop, don't say any more. My ears burned with embarrassment as I cut off his line of conversation. Zhu Xingjian took my hand. After you've rested for a few days, come with me to the palace. To the palace. I have requested the Emperor's blessing for our marriage and need you to accompany me to an audience with His Majesty. So soon? No wonder I was surprised, even in the original story. The female lead had to wait until after the new year before Zhu Xingjian sought the imperial marriage approval. There were still over 3 months until the new year. Zhu Xingjian misunderstood my meaning, his brow furrowing tightly. Are you trying to go back on your word again? Last night, you were the one who personally confessed your feelings for me. Just thinking about the circumstances under which I said those words makes me blush. All right. Don't make it sound like I'm some heartless woman. I won't go back on my word. I do have feelings for Zhu Xingjian. From the very beginning when I read the book, like many readers, I also liked his character. Later, after arriving in this world and interacting with him every day, I'm no Liu Xiaohui. How could I not be moved? Zhu Xingjian, afraid that I might change my mind, took me into the palace 3 days later and received the imperial decree from the new emperor, granting us marriage. Before I could even process what was happening, I was already married and had become Zhu Xingjian's wife. At this point, the original story reached its complete conclusion. From then on, the plot would be solely about Zhu Xingjian and me, no longer controlled by any external factors. Later, I gave birth to a pair of twins, a boy and a girl. When they grew to 5 years old, Zhu Xingjian made a decision. He resigned from his official post and took me, the children, and grandma back to Xinghua village. Why did you suddenly resign from your official position? I asked. Accompanying the emperor is like accompanying a tiger. Although I hold a high position, I am deeply distrusted and suspected by the emperor. It would be better to voluntarily resign and retire, returning all power and influence, so that I can preserve the happiness before me, he said. Zhu Xingjian had no desire to experience falling into the mud again. Moreover, he now had a wife, children, and elders to protect, and he absolutely could not allow himself to fall into a desperate situation again. It was certainly wise to plan ahead. In the sunset, two figures embrace in front of the wooden cabin. Living a pastoral life, though simple, is filled with happiness. The end.